moving on. Kemi Badenoch is said to be considering plans to change the Equality Act that could see the introduction of explicit legal protections for biological women in same-sex spaces and sports for the first time. The Equalities Minister has said the government wants to look at creating a legal distinction between people who were born female and those who had transitioned to become women. Joining me now for a discussion on this is human rights campaigner Peter Tatchell and Director of Transgender Trend, Stephanie Davis-Araya. Thank you very much, both of you. Great to have you on the show. Stephanie, I will start with you. Do you think this is a step in the right direction, or is it oppressive?
No, absolutely it's a step in the right direction. You can only support both women's and trans rights if you can make a clear distinction between those two categories and those two protected characteristics. So the inclusion of trans women or men who identify as women into women's spaces has led to detriments to women's equality. So when you include male athletes in female sports, for example, every time a female athlete is excluded, toilets and changing rooms, women are self-excluding. Women of particular religions cannot use those facilities anymore. The most vulnerable women, those who've been sexually abused, cannot use those facilities. So, you know, on a company board, you can fulfill your quota of women on the board by employing a man who identifies as a woman, and therefore a woman loses her place. And what we're seeing in schools, it particularly worries me that schools are, everybody seems to be confused about this difference between the protected characteristic sex and gender reassignment. They are separate protected characteristics. Trans people are not losing rights through making this clear. So what schools are doing are conflating those two protected characteristics so that they are the same, and that always disadvantages girls.
Okay, all right. I'm going to bring Peter in now. Peter, there seems to be an obvious solution to this for me, which is build more changing rooms and toilets so that people can use them, and also, as well, just create trans categories at sports events. Then everybody's happy, no?
Well, this proposal would fundamentally change the Equality Act, which is one of the most important and significant legislations this century. It protects everyone against discrimination. It guarantees equal treatment for everyone in all circumstances. I would be very reluctant to see any changes to that status, and in particular, to single out trans people for particular exemptions. Under this proposal, it would mean that a trans woman who has a gender recognition certificate, a legal gender recognition certificate, would be recognized in that certificate, but that certificate would have no status under a revised Equality Act. When it comes to issues like changing rooms and toilets, look, most of us have been to pop festivals where there are gender-neutral toilets. They're all porta-cabin toilets lined up, portaloos lined up everywhere. They've got lockable cubicles. There's not a problem. You know, there have been a handful of incidents where trans women have done bad things, but that is not the basis on which we make law in this country. Just because of a few bad apples, we don't penalise a whole community, and that's what this legal change would do.
We're going to have to be quick, Amber. Go on.
That is the basis on which we have separate sex facilities in the first place. We don't say all men are rapists. We have separate facilities for the safety of women and girls based on that minority, and most men would agree with the need for that.
Okay, all right, Peter, look, I'll just give you the final word on this. Look, with respect, trans people are by definition different to normal sexual birthrights or whatever, you know what I'm trying to say. So why shouldn't they have a different characteristic?
Look, you're absolutely right. You know, trans women are different. Their difference is based on gender identity, whereas other women have their identity based upon their biological sex. And I would just say these are two different things. Biological sex is perfectly valid. So is gender identity. Let's find the common ground. I just hate the way in which trans people are being victimized and demonized like they're the enemy within. They're not. They don't cause discrimination against women. They don't cause sexual assaults and abuse and harassment of women. Focus on the real enemy. It's misogynist men.
Okay, all right, well, look, both of you, thank you very much. Bit pressed for time. We could have obviously gone on there, but I'll have to get you both back on to discuss this further. That is Peter Tatchell, human rights campaigner and director of Transgender Trends, Stephanie Davies. Right.